Hey Reddit, I'm Ryan, and I just turned 21. You'd think that would be a big deal, right? A milestone birthday, maybe a nice dinner, a cake, or at the very least, a simple happy birthday text from my parents, but nope, they had more important things to do. I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, this is just how it's always been. My parents have made it clear since childhood that I'm an afterthought. My younger sister Emma is the golden child. If she wants something, she gets it. If she needs attention, she gets it. And me? If I ask for even the smallest thing that slightly inconveniences them? Too bad, Ryan. Still, some stupid, naive part of me thought maybe this year would be different. I don't live at home anymore, so I don't deal with their favoritism as often. But I figured, it's my 21st birthday. They can't ignore that, right? That morning, I texted the family group chat. Hey, what time are we meeting for dinner? No response. Hours passed. I went about my day expecting someone to text back. By 3 p.m., I started feeling that familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. I finally gave in and called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice casual. Hey Ryan, what's up? I hesitated. We're still doing dinner, right? Silence. Then a sigh. Oh, honey, she said, way too sweetly. I should have told you earlier. We're going out tonight with Emma. My stomach dropped. You're... what? She sounded almost bored. Emma has some exciting news, so we're taking her out to celebrate. I blinked. It's my birthday. She actually laughed, like I was a little kid whining about losing a toy. Oh, Ryan, don't be so dramatic. We'll do something for you next weekend, okay? And in the background, I heard Emma's voice. Is that Ryan? Tell him we'll save him some leftovers. More laughter. I felt my face heat up. This wasn't just them being thoughtless. This was deliberate. I could have argued, could have yelled. But what was the point? They knew exactly what they were doing. They just didn't care. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, yeah, sure, have fun. Then I hung up. I sat there for a moment staring at my phone. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. No, I was pissed. Then an idea hit me. I called my girlfriend Lily. Hey, I said, keeping my voice even. Want to go out for dinner tonight? She picked up on my tone immediately. Of course. What happened? I told her everything. She didn't even hesitate. Come over. My parents will want to celebrate with you too. Now, I love Lily's parents. In the past 3 years, they've treated me with more warmth and kindness than my own family ever has. When I got to their house, her mom greeted me with a tight hug. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Come in. We're going somewhere nice. We ended up at this high-end steakhouse, the kind of place my parents love to brag about going to. The whole night was perfect. Lily's dad even ordered a bottle of champagne to celebrate me turning 21. And for the first time that day, I actually felt wanted. But the real fun? That happened when I posted about it. After dinner, I snapped a picture of the restaurant entrance and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Huge thank you to my girlfriend and her amazing family for making my birthday special. So grateful to have people who actually care about me." I wasn't expecting a response from my parents. Figured they wouldn't even see it until the next day. But less than an hour later, my phone started blowing up. First, a text from my mom. Ryan, what is this post? Then my dad. Are you serious right now? Then a full-on phone call. I let it ring, smirking to myself, let them stew in it. Then another call, and another. They were fuming, and I knew exactly why. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't regret, it was jealousy. My parents loved playing the role of the perfect family, posting online about their fancy dinners, gushing over Emma's accomplishments, soaking up praise. But now I was the one getting attention. People were sympathizing with me, and they hated that. I finally picked up on the fourth call, keeping my voice casual. Oh, hey Mom, what's up? She exploded. What the hell are you doing, Ryan? People are seeing this. You're making us look bad. I held back a laugh. I'm just thanking the people who actually showed up for my birthday. She gasped like I just slapped her. How dare you try to embarrass us like this? You know we would have celebrated with you if we didn't have prior commitments. I snorted. Oh right, Emma's exciting news. Her voice turned sharp. We raised you, Ryan, and this is how you repay us? By making us look like bad parents? I took a slow breath, my patience hanging by a thread. If you didn't want to look like bad parents, I said evenly, you probably shouldn't have acted like bad parents. Silence. Then my dad got on the phone. His voice was low, dangerous. "You need to take that post down. Now." I grinned. "No." His tone dropped even lower. "If you don't take it down, there will be consequences." I leaned back in my chair. "Oh? Like what?" A pause. I could hear my mom whispering furiously in the background. Then my dad said something that made my pulse spike. "We're coming over." I tightened my grip on the phone, adrenaline kicking in. But I didn't let it show in my voice. Instead, I smiled. "All right," I said, barely containing my smirk. "See you soon." Then I hung up. Lily, sitting beside me on the couch, raised an eyebrow. "That was your parents, wasn't it?" "Oh yeah," I said, shaking my head. "They're pissed. Apparently, I've embarrassed them." Mia rolled her eyes. God forbid they deal with the consequences of their own actions. Her dad, who had been listening from across the room, scoffed. "Let them come. Maybe they'll see what an actual loving family looks like." Her mom, ever the voice of reason, sighed. "This might get ugly. Are you sure you want to deal with them tonight?" I exhaled slowly. "Honestly? Yeah, I do. I'd spent years letting them treat me like an afterthought. Years watching them drop everything for Emma while I was expected to just deal with it. And now, for the first time, I had the upper hand. They were desperate, scrambling to control the narrative. That meant I was finally doing something right. 20 minutes later, the unmistakable sound of tires crunching into the driveway made my stomach tighten. I stood up, stretching like I had all the time in the world, while Mia squeezed my arm. "You got this?" she murmured. The doorbell rang. No, slammed. 3 times, hard. "Oh, they're mad," Lily's dad chuckled, standing up. "I'll get it." The second he opened the door, my mom stormed in like she owned the place. My dad followed, jaw tight, his eyes locking onto me like I was the only thing in the room. "Ryan?" My mom's voice was sharp, slicing through the air. "We need to talk. Now." I crossed my arms. "Go ahead." Her gaze flickered around, taking in the cozy living room, the warm atmosphere, the clear evidence that I was fine, thriving even without them. It rattled her. "Not here," she said stiffly. "Come outside." I leaned against the couch, unmoving. "No thanks. If you have something to say, you can say it right here." My dad clenched his fists. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white, his jaw twitching as he tried, and failed, to keep his temper in check. "You're being ridiculous," he ground out. "You're going to regret this." I tilted my head, studying him like he was some wild animal backed into a corner. "No, Dad. I think the only people regretting anything right now are you and Mom. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not just rolling over and taking it." My mom let out a bitter laugh. "You're acting like a child, Alex. You think your little rebellion makes you independent? You think these people," she gestured vaguely at Lily and her family, "actually care about you more than we do? They're not your real family. Blood is blood. And one day you're going to come crawling back, begging us to take you in. And when that day comes," she leveled a cold, triumphant look at me, "I want you to remember this moment." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head in disbelief. "You still don't get it." I took a step closer, my voice calm but firm. "There will never be a day where I come crawling back to you. Because for the first time, I have a real family, not one I was born into, but one I chose. And the difference?" I glanced over at Lily, at her parents, at the people who had shown me more love in the past 3 years than my own had my entire life. Then I looked back at my mother, my voice steady. "They actually want me around." The words hit their mark. I saw it in the way my mom's lips pressed into a thin, furious line, the way my dad's nostrils flared as his control slipped. But I didn't care. "We're done here," I said simply, stepping back. My dad took a sharp breath like he was about to fire back, but my mom grabbed his arm. "Let's go," she snapped. Then, with one last glare, she turned and stormed out. My dad lingered a second longer, his eyes burning into mine like he wanted to say something, maybe one final threat, maybe a plea, but I just stared back, waiting. And in the end, he said nothing. He just turned and followed my mother out the door. The second the door clicked shut, I let out a long breath, tension draining from my body. Lily's dad clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Well, kid," he said with a chuckle, "I'd say that went about as well as it could have." Mia smirked. "If by well you mean a total disaster that ended with your parents disowning you." "Oh please," I cut in, rolling my eyes. "They practically disowned me years ago. This was just making it official." Lily squeezed my hand, her voice soft. You okay? I looked at her, at the warmth in her eyes, at the steady support in her touch. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Yeah, I said, smiling for real this time. I think I actually am. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the weight of her words settle before I responded. You didn't support me. You tolerated me when it was convenient and discarded me when it wasn't. That's not love. That's control. My mom's face twisted, her anger barely concealed beneath a layer of forced disappointment. You're being dramatic, she shot back. You were never treated unfairly. I laughed, actually laughed. Right. Because ditching me on my birthday to celebrate Emma wasn't unfair? Because years of being treated like an afterthought while she got everything handed to her wasn't unfair? My dad took a step forward, his jaw tight. Emma is special. She needed us more than you did. I felt my stomach twist, but not from pain, no, this time it was clarity. And there it is, I murmured, shaking my head. You never saw me as someone worth putting effort into. I was just there, the extra kid, the backup plan. And now that I finally see it for what it is, you can't stand it. My mom's lip curled, like she wanted to snap back with something cruel, something that would put me in my place. But I didn't have a place here anymore, and I think she was just realizing that. You'll regret this, she spat. One day you'll come crawling back and we won't be here. I met her gaze head on, calm and certain. I hope so. She flinched, like the words had actually struck her. Now, I continued, stepping aside and gesturing toward the door, I think we're done here. My dad looked ready to explode, but my mom grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. She knew. They had lost. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stalked toward the door, my dad following, his shoulders rigid with barely contained fury. I didn't move until I heard the front door slam shut. The second they were gone, the tension in my chest finally unraveled. I exhaled, long and slow, then turned to find Lily standing in the doorway. Her eyes filled with something I hadn't expected, pride. You okay? She asked softly. I let the question settle, really let myself feel the weight of everything that had just happened. The years of neglect, the desperate need for their approval, the constant battle to be seen. All of it was over. I met her gaze and smiled. Yeah, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. I finally am. I remember being the last choice, always. But sure, if you want to keep pretending you've been perfect parents, go ahead. My mom's face twisted, a mix of shock and fury flashing across her features. The cracks in her perfect little world were forming, and she knew it. She hadn't expected this. She thought I would fold, like I always had. That I'd cave and beg for their approval, desperate for even the smallest scrap of love. But that wasn't me anymore. This is your fault, Alex, she spat, her voice shaking. You're the one destroying this family. You think you can just replace us with them? I looked at her, my expression cold, unwavering. Mom, I said, my voice eerily calm. You've been replacing me my whole life. This is just me finally realizing I don't need you anymore. I paused, letting the words sink in. And you've already lost. She took a sharp step forward, her eyes burning with rage. I am your mother. You will never get rid of me. I held up my hand, cutting her off. I don't need to get rid of you, I said simply. You've already done that yourself. You pushed me away for years. You made it clear where your priorities lie. And I was never on that list. Before she could snap back, Lily's dad stepped forward. His presence alone was enough to shift the energy in the room. He wasn't loud, he wasn't aggressive, but his voice, steady and firm, carried a weight my parents couldn't ignore. I think it's time for you two to leave, he said, his tone final. My mom's eyes flashed, fury dancing behind them. She hated losing control, but even she knew she had no more moves left to play. My dad muttered something under his breath, his shoulders tense, but he didn't argue, didn't even look at me. He just turned toward the door. My mom hesitated for a moment, staring at me like she was trying to burn this moment into her memory. Then, without another word, they walked out. The door slammed behind them. I stood there, still gripping the back of the couch, trying to process everything. It felt surreal. Mia came over, wrapping her arms around me. Her voice was thick with emotion as she whispered, "You did it." I swallowed hard. I don't even know how I did it, I admitted. It's like they finally don't have any power over me anymore. Lily's parents gave me reassuring pats on the back, quiet but steady, like they understood the weight of what had just happened. But it was Lily's words that stuck with me the most. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly, squeezing my hand. "We've got your back. Always." And just like that, something inside me settled. For the first time, the weight was gone, that constant, suffocating pressure, the need to prove myself, to earn a love that was never truly there, had lifted. For the first time, I could breathe. The night carried on in a strange, almost eerie calm. The tension that had filled every inch of space in that room seemed to vanish the second my parents walked out. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But it didn't last long. As I sat there, finally allowing myself to relax, my phone buzzed on the table. I barely glanced at it, expecting something trivial. But when I saw my mom's name flash across the screen, my stomach twisted. I didn't even want to look. But I did. "Mom, we're not done here. You'll regret this. We'll be contacting the lawyer about your inheritance. You'll pay for this." I stared at the screen, reading it over again. I could practically hear her voice, sharp and venomous, dripping with manufactured outrage. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders back, waiting for that familiar panic to creep in. The fear, the guilt, the urge to fix things, to smooth it over. But nothing. It didn't scare me anymore. It didn't hold the weight it once did. I glanced over at Lily sitting beside me, her parents giving us space, letting me process it all in my own time. I tilted my phone toward her, letting her read the message. She barely skimmed it before scoffing. "Is she serious?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Oh yeah," I said. "She really thinks this is gonna work." But it wasn't going to. Not this time. Not ever again. "Dead serious," I muttered, but this time there was no fear in my voice. If anything, I was amused. My fingers moved across my phone screen with ease, like the words were pouring out of a part of me I hadn't even realized existed. "You're right, you won't be done here, but I'll tell you this, keep your money, keep your inheritance, and when you're ready to talk to me like an adult, without the threats and the manipulation, you know where to find me. But don't waste your time trying anything else. It won't work. And if you think I'm scared, you've got another thing coming." I hit send, and with that, the last weight I'd been carrying for years finally lifted. It felt like I had just closed a chapter that had dragged on far longer than it ever should have. Just as I set my phone down, it buzzed again. This time, it was my dad. No texts, just a string of angry voice notes. I tapped on the first one, letting his words fill the silence. A furious tirade. Accusations, insults, empty threats. I played the next one, more of the same. And the next. His voice was getting more frantic now, more desperate. But none of it hit me like it used to. It was just noise. Background static from a life I no longer lived. I didn't bother replying. I didn't need to. Lily's dad caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I nodded, a slow smile curling at the edges of my lips. "Yeah," I said simply. "They're just not used to me standing up for myself. But they'll get over it." Mia leaned in closer, wrapping her arms around me in a tight hug. "You've got this. They can't touch you anymore." And she was right. They couldn't. Because at that moment, I realized something. They had nothing left to take from me. Not their threats, not their money, not even their approval. I had already walked away from their version of family and into something real. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down. This time, it was my sister. "Emma, Mom and Dad are furious with you. You really messed up this time." For a split second, I felt the old anger bubbling up, that familiar sting of resentment clawing at my chest. But just as quickly, it faded. I wasn't going to let her pull me back in. I wasn't going to play her game. Instead of replying, I turned to Lily, warmth spreading through me. "You know what?" I said, standing up, stretching like I'd just shaken off the last chains of my past. "I think it's time for a celebration. I'm done with all of this." I grabbed my jacket, grinning as I turned to Lily's parents. "Let's go grab some drinks. We've got a lot to celebrate." As we stepped out into the cool night air, I expected to feel something. Bitterness, regret, maybe even doubt. But all I felt was relief, because I was finally walking away from a life that had been holding me back, and toward a future that was mine to shape. The family I had been searching for, the love I had spent years chasing, had been right here all along. Not in the people I was born to, but in the ones who chose me, the ones who stood by me, the ones who truly cared. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their toxic love or their manipulation. I had something better. And nothing, not their threats, their inheritance, or their guilt trips could take that away from me. For the first time in my life, I was free. So, what do you think? Am I out of line for standing up to them? Or did I finally do the right thing? As we walked away from that house, I took one last deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. It felt different, lighter, freer, like I'd been carrying a weight my entire life without even realizing it. And now, for the first time, it was gone. Lily slid her hand into mine, squeezing gently. "How do you feel?" she asked, studying my face like she expected some kind of delayed reaction, some moment of doubt or hesitation. But there was none. I grinned, like I finally won, and I had. Not in the way my parents would define winning. There was no dramatic victory, no mic drop moment that would change them or make them suddenly realize their mistakes. No, that was never going to happen. They weren't going to wake up tomorrow as different people. They weren't going to apologize or reflect on what they'd done. But that didn't matter. Because I had walked away on my terms. They had spent years trying to convince me that I needed them, that my value came from their validation, that my worth depended on their approval. But standing there, outside of that house, surrounded by people who actually loved me, not because they had to, but because they chose to, I realized the truth. I never needed them. They needed me. They needed someone to use. They needed someone to manipulate, someone to keep their perfect little image intact. And now that I was gone, they were scrambling, desperate to regain control over something they had already lost. And that was their problem, not mine. Lily's dad clapped a hand on my shoulder, his voice warm. "Proud of you, kid. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially against people who are supposed to love you." I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. "You know, I used to think family was something you were just stuck with," I said, my voice steady, like no matter what, you had to forgive them, had to keep coming back, no matter how much they hurt you. But I don't believe that anymore. "Good," Lily said softly, "because this is family, right here." And she was right. Family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about respect. And I had finally found mine. As we headed off to celebrate, I stole one last glance at my phone, where my mother's final text still sat, waiting. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, Mom, I never will.